Make This Make Sense brings together 3 professors and dynamic guests to unpack
the systems, trends, and social dynamics everyone is confused about,
with the women who actually understand them. With your hosts,
entrepreneurship professor Dr. Colleen Robb,
entrepreneurship instructor Annie Stout,
and blockchain instructor Kelly Werder.
What happens when highly trained women are excellent at their jobs but still can't get ahead? In science and healthcare, women often face subtle and sometimes not so subtle barriers that diminish their expertise, limit their opportunities, and even drive them out of their careers. In Harsh Medicine, Dr. Jennifer Grandis explores why this happens, drawing on interviews with more than 100 professionals, and importantly, what we can do to change it. Welcome, Dr. Jennifer Grandis.
And it's the Hat Squad today.
Hats on.
I've gone with the pink.
I like the pink.
We talked about in the last episode that we made some merch, and we're starting to sport it. So now we're official. It's all official.
It is.
So I did just get back from Mexico City, right? Visiting a good friend, and I did wear my hat on the plane. So the hat has gone international now.
The hat is international. And people
Perfect.
are clamoring for it, is what I hear.
Yes,
clamoring.
absolutely. Nobody asked me about it.
Yeah. Well, they will, but they will.
You got to go back to Mexico then.
And Colleen, you've been stepping up on the socials quite a bit. And one of the questions that you asked related to your trip. So tell us about it.
Well, so I put this on TikTok because when the plane gets to the gate, the seatbelt goes off, people either stand or sit. And apparently in this article, there were like the top 10 pet peeves. And number 3 were people who stand immediately. And I'm a stander because I feel like it helps us deplane faster.
I'm a stander and I'm starting to feel bad about it.
I am. Really, I want to bond with you. So I'm sitting there.
Oh, okay.
And you're a talker on a plane, aren't you?
I actually am.
I'm gonna remember to never sit next to you on a plane.
Kelly, you and I can sit together.
Yeah,
thanks.
And my headphones will be on, and I'm not talking to you. I'm just letting you know.
I do have to say it is totally worth it to go to TikTok where I posted it. The comments are something.
They are quite amusing. Some people feel very strongly about this.
Yes, I had no idea.
You can also find it on Instagram. So go give us a follow and go add your thoughts. All right, ladies, let's get to why we're really here and bring up Dr. Jennifer Grandis, who's, got just an amazing background. And I'm really excited that she's joining us. So here she is. Welcome.
Hello.
First, very important question before we get started. Are you a sitter or a stander on a plane when the plane is about to debark?
It depends on where I'm sitting. If I have an aisle seat, I stand because I feel like I'm part of exiting that row. Yeah. And if I'm in the middle or the window, which I hardly ever am, I kind of wait to see what the aisle person does, because the worst thing in the world is to be standing up next to the person who's blocking you and they're sitting. So basically, it's a nuanced answer.
This is why I always get an aisle seat if at all possible. Right? I'm like, I want to stand as soon as possible.
Totally.
Well, that makes sense.
That makes sense. We make that make sense. Annie, why don't you kick us off?
Sure.
I know you have some amazing questions for our guest.
And I always have my I know Colleen loves my, Sharpie.
She does old school notes.
I'm an old school lady. Okay. So, thank you for jumping on with us today. Your book is called Harsh Medicine. What made you realize that something was fundamentally wrong with the way women were being treated in academic and medical settings?
Thank you so much for the question. Well, in full disclosure, I am a physician and a scientist. We call ourselves physician scientists. So kind of an amalgam of the two. And I am not a super young person. I'm 65 years old. And my awareness of gender was really sharp and then muted. So I was the only woman, and that was hard to ignore. So I was the only woman in my surgical residency. And there were more women in science, but not that many, and very few in leadership positions. You know, virtually all of my mentors have been men. And so my solution to that uncomfortable situation, because it's really uncomfortable for anyone to be the only person like them in the room, was to ignore it and to just kind of deal with it. And what would they call that? Grit or resilience or denial or whatever. You know, I did a small study maybe 25 years ago, surveying all the men in my field. I'm an ear, nose, and throat doctor, otherwise known as an otolaryngologist. And I surveyed all, at the time, 504 women in the country. I compared each woman to 2 men, and I found very important differences between the men and women in my field, most of which were pretty surprising to me, because I really spent all my life in academia at universities. And as a scientist, I was pretty different from most of the other surgeons, but I really felt like studying it and publishing it was the solution. I'll give you a small example as to why that wasn't true at all. So I found, shockingly to me, that women ear, nose, and throat doctors earned 20% less than their male counterparts for ostensibly doing exactly the same thing. I could not figure that out. I'm like, that makes no sense. So I published this back in 2004. Then in 2024, Doximity reported on the gender pay gap in medicine, and in every single field, male doctors earn more than female doctors. And the widest gap is otolaryngology. So I thought, okay, I did not make a difference. So I need to do something else. But so that was an awareness that by publishing it, it's the beginning, but it's not the end. And honestly, what really stimulated this line of research relatively late in my career was being harassed by my boss as a very senior person and not being able to manage it and stay in the position that I was in. And I thought, oh my goodness, I have so many good qualities, so many, genetic and learned qualities that should have allowed me to manage this, but I just couldn't. And so I felt such shame. I felt such devastation, but I thought, okay, I have so much else going for me. I have, such a reputation in the fields of academic medicine. In my case, it's cancer research. And so let me use my power, if I can find it, and let me make a difference. So I learned how to be a qualitative researcher. I've not done that before. I was mostly molecular biology and clinical trials. And in 2019, I went around the country, and in an IRB design protocol with a lot of help from sociologists, I interviewed 54 men and 54 women to try to understand indirectly what happened to me, but also really try to learn the experiences and the points of view of the people in my field. And so I wrote some articles, because that's what we do in academia, and I had to get some credibility there, and then found an agent, wrote a book, and there it is.
And congrats on that, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. I say it so readily, but I understand it's not trivial. Like 99% of people who are harassed do not end up doing this. And so I feel really grateful that I had the resources and have the resources to be able to do it.
That's amazing. That's it's an amazing, what you went through to get to that point and to really shift things around, and that you took that effort, because a lot of people would just move on. And I've, been one of those people, and I've known many people who you face that situation and you're just like, I just want to get out of this situation, and I don't want to revisit it. So that's incredible that you then went on to help others to see what they could do. Also, 2004 is when you studied that first publication. I really thought you were going to say earlier. When you said there was such a discrepancy still, I'm like, how is there still such a discrepancy in that, in the 2000s? That is insane.
Well, I think it's been forever, right, ladies? I mean, I think that, without systems in place. So at the end of the day, the fundamental conclusion is that human beings are flawed. Boys are flawed, girls are flawed, men are flawed, women are flawed. We're human, and we bring our preconceived notions of who we can be and who we should be and who others can be and should be with us when we go to work. And we need help in being better versions of ourselves. And at the end of the day, if someone, if the systems aren't in place to assure something like pay equity, it isn't going to happen. So two interesting things. When I moved from the University of Pittsburgh to the University of California, I was confronted with a system that required, all of our salaries are public. So you could just go to the Sacramento Bee and you can find out what anybody earns. It's not completely perfect, but it certainly is transparent. And nobody died, because what I was told forever is, oh, no, it's a secret.
Yep.
You can't talk about these things. It's unseemly. You're like, no, that's not true. And even though we have a state mandated requirement for gender pay equity, we have to look at it every single year, because human beings are problematic. So, it's this, so the system is working because it's requiring that we address it. But without that requirement, it probably wouldn't happen. And there's and I don't want to point the finger at any one person, but there's so many factors that contribute to something as simple as that. And as you guys know, when the pay gap is big early on, even if you fix it later, those earnings over a lifetime are forever compromised. And so yes. So you're right. How on earth could it have been true in 2000? How could it still be true now? And the answer is because it's the world.
Yeah. It just amazes me that we're still here, but especially in a medical field, like that really just shocks me.
I know.
Shocks
I
me.
know. It is shocking. Yes. So this is supposed to be a meritocracy. That's the other thing. I mean, it's really a myth, and one of the reasons I think I leaned into being a scientist, one is it really was my calling, but two, it was clear to me that, to convince people that you were a great surgeon, for example, you kind of had to look like a surgeon. Even now, if you go to any AI platform and you want pictures of surgeons, I don't think you're going to get any pictures of people who look like me. And in the ideal world, we would look at people's success rates and complication rates. And when that's been done, women surgeons in general appear to be better surgeons than male, and women doctors appear to be more effective and that their patients have better outcomes and they have fewer complications. But that's not the narrative. I mean, the narrative is, he doesn't look like one of us, and so therefore he can't be very good, or, she has a very aggressive personality. And we don't think that's appropriate, and that's going to diminish our assessment of her. So one of the reasons why I leaned into science is it really felt like it was a meritocracy. You had to compete for grant funding. Your papers had to go through the process of aggressive and rigid peer review. But yet again, I think that it's still a little bit of a myth.
Yeah.
And so if a woman is listening today and she recognizes herself in one of the stories from Harsh Medicine, what's the first thing you want her to know?
That you're not alone. You're just not alone. And I can tell you, when all of us go through these experiences in the moment, it is so lonely. You feel ashamed. Even if you didn't do anything to invite this treatment, the fact that this person or these people are treating you this way and nobody's doing anything about it really feels awful. So that's the important thing, is know that you're not alone. And the other thing that I would say, and this just came up recently, I was talking to a group of people, both younger and older women. I have to say, what's wonderful about the last 6 weeks is that now I talk to people who've read it. Before that, they heard me, they read my papers, but they hadn't read the book. And what's the most common response from women who I would say are more senior is, it's like I was writing their life story. And even when their initial reaction was, I'm fine, I've had a great career, nothing bad has ever happened to me, as they read the stories of the other people, they're like, oh yeah, that happened to me. Oh yeah, that happened to me. And so I was just recently at a gathering with mostly young women, but a couple of us were older, and the young women, one of them asked such an astute question. She said, it sounds like what you did was you buried it. You repressed it. You just barreled through. And is that what we should be doing? And of course the answer is no. But we don't have a control group. I don't know what I would have been if I had fought it, but I can tell you that I think there's a big suite of opportunities of behaviors between suing, fighting, and ignoring. And I think that the price for those of us who barreled through is something we're still reckoning with. Because because when you are blind in one sphere of your life, you're probably blind in other spheres of your life, and not being aware of what's happening in some relationships is really problematic, for those relationships as well as for your sense of self, because the message that you're not good enough, you might want to press it down, but it still eats at you, and it still emerges in ways that are really unhealthy and inconvenient. But at the very least, what I want the women to know or anybody, men or women who feel this way, is talk to each other, write it down, talk to people you trust, because if we don't address it, even if it's done informally, like you're not in charge, you're not in power, you're not the person who can put the new policy or system in place to mitigate it, at least you don't have to be complicit. And when it's happening to other people, and I hear many, many stories of, I haven't had this experience, but I saw it happening to a fellow trainee, a fellow student, a fellow colleague. Talk about it with them. Let them know that you see it. Let them know that it's not in their head, and that it isn't okay, and you're there to support them. Even if the two of you alone collectively don't have the power, maybe if you talk about it, you could think of ways to engage others who may be in a higher position of influence and status.
Yeah, I remember our very first episode, we interviewed Dr. Chelsea Smith, and she studies workplace incivility. And she described it as death by 1,000 paper cuts. Does that resonate? Like, it's like a bunch of little things that just kind of add up.
Yeah. The word that swims around in my head is microaggression. I really have come to understand the value and the danger of those terms, because when we put micro in front of it, we minimize it. And yet the word aggression is very real. Let me give you an example. There's a lot of evidence, including experiences of the people I interviewed, that when men are introduced to speak at professional conferences, they are introduced as doctor. And when the women are introduced, more often than not, they're introduced by their first name.
Wow.
And this makes you feel weird. At some level, sure, we want to be casual. We want to be, I want to be Jenny from the block. I want people to, we want to be likable. We want to be likable. I mean, we really do. We want people to like us, because if they don't like us, we're unlikely to be successful, is the honest answer. And so everybody, of course, every little kid wants to be liked. Every adult wants to be liked, and we want to be liked in the workplace. So it suggests that there's a likability factor that we're winning on, but immediately it diminishes our professionalism and our value. And I think that by calling it a microaggression, there's no impetus to change it. There's no impetus to work on it. And it's so easy. It's so easy to fix. Like, one of the people who I met with in the last couple of years said, oh yeah, it happened to me last week. And I walked up to the microphone. I said, yes, my name is, let's say, Susan, but I'm doctor. I went to medical school. I have a degree. So I just want everybody to know that I am Dr. blah, blah, blah. So just correct it. There's nothing wrong with that, particularly because it's such a weird thing to do. And then I think the more and more people who are aware of it, they will learn, they will do their best. Let me give you an example. I was on a NPR radio show the day the book came out in the Bay Area. And there was a caller, and the caller said, I'm a feminist, identifies as a feminist. I was hiking in Europe. An older woman, seemed to collapse, on the hiking trail, and another woman rushed over to her, and I went over to see if I could help. And I said to the woman who rushed over, are you a nurse? And she said, no, I'm a doctor. And she said, I can't believe that my instinct was for her to be a nurse. Yeah. And what I want to say is, okay, forgive yourself. But next time, you won't have that same instinct. Or when that instinct bubbles up, you'll say, check. Not necessarily, So I think that we have to forgive ourselves as human beings, because there are going to be, confusions, biases. I mean, we just bring the entire world into our professional spaces. But I think we can do better. That's the hopeful message I have and let's stop calling them, 1,000 cuts. And let's not call them microaggressions. I said, these are problematic. These are really corrosive behaviors that make a person feel unwelcome.
By the way, I just edited your name because I didn't do this, but you left out the doctor, so I just added it in.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Interesting.
And again, unconscious, right?
Yeah.
Because
Right.
I want
Wow.
to be likable, and if
And I
insist-
usually catch it and ask the guest, because I am conscious of that. And I make sure, like, if it's a doctor, if it's a PhD, if it, I check for because that it's a great point. And it happens a lot where that gets left off for not just women, but it seems to happen more often than not with women. So I'm like really conscious of that, because you earned it.
Yep.
You earned it.
Yeah.
It needs to be,
I know
it should
that-
be there. Yeah.
I know that when I'm teaching, a lot of students will call me Miss. And I just in my head go, do you call your male professors Mr.?
No, they don't. No, they don't. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's exactly right. Yeah. 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 So thank you actually for pointing out that I did it. Like
You did it.
I took away. Right. You're exactly right.
I just
So
wanted
there
to
you
make sure
go.
they knew that I didn't do it.
No, I did it. And I forgive myself.
Great.
Forgive yourself. That's amazing. Annie.
So what was the shift like for you to be primarily quantitative, writing grants and things like in the scientific world, to this transition to speaking with people about their experiences?
Well, it was a little bit easier for me, I think, than for others, because I am a clinician. I see patients every single week. I walk into an office room, a small room. It's often just me and a stranger. Sometimes they'll have a family member, sometimes not. And my job is to understand what brought them there and understand why they're suffering and how I can help them. So I think that those clinical instincts, which, I've honed over now many decades, sort of came into play. And the other thing that was really curious for me about this experience is, even though I wasn't known as a person who studied gender inequities, I was a very esteemed member of their profession. So they understood that I was very accomplished, and I was usually at their institution because I was either giving a talk or I was on some, advisory board. So I was one of them. I wasn't a journalist, and I was one of them. And I think this is so important in the post-COVID era. This was before COVID. So I was in their space. I walked into their office. The door was closed. They gave IRB approved consent, and I recorded the conversation, and I was just really interested in them and their point of view. So while it was a new role as an investigator for me, it was a pretty familiar role as a human.
So what did you really gain as a human from this experience?
So much. Like, I still remember them. I mean, this is now almost 7 years ago, but I remember their faces. I remember the journey and the conversation. These are not normal conversations. We don't talk to each other about these things. And so here was a space where I was inviting them to unpack experiences that were uncomfortable, unfamiliar, or worse. And I'm so amazed that they went there, both the men and the women. And I learned so much. I took away the common, it was sample size. So we always sort of have to calculate a sample size using statistical models. And my mentor is this incredible Harley Russell Hochschild. She's a sociologist at Berkeley, very, very accomplished, writes great books as well. And I said, how will I know when I've interviewed enough people? And she said, when you don't hear anything new. And what was really interesting is I was hearing very, very similar stories. And I got to like a little over 100. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm there. Like, I think I've heard, it's not that there aren't other things to hear, but there were so many common features. And so what I think I appreciated, because I think of my cancer research as research, because I haven't had cancer myself. And I think of this kind of research as me search, because this did happen to me. And I had so many of the similar experiences. So it was very healing. I mean, it was really a therapeutic experience as a woman in science and medicine, but it was also extremely eye-opening. I mean, these are people, if not the individuals themselves, the kinds of individuals who I known and worked with for decades. So it was incredibly illuminating. And then the question I went into is, why are we stuck? Same question you asked. Why has there been so little movement on these issues that we've known about? I was motivated a little by a National Academy study in 2018 that found that 46% of women in academic medicine report being sexually harassed. I'm like, that's crazy. Like, why? And so I wanted to understand why. And by the end of the study, I did. And that was, it was really, I learned a lot.
So why
That's
the
a crazy,
title?
that's a crazy number. That is just a crazy, I just have to stop on that for a moment, but it is and it's not. Because I can probably find it in almost every other profession, and it's probably even higher.
Right,
in some,
exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's probably even higher because that's just reported.
Right,
So
exactly.
Like,
and the other thing that I think is really important,
that boggles my mind.
that moves me, like people are like, why should we care? This is old news. And of course, now we're living in an anti-DEI climate, which almost is gaslighting, that this happens and that it matters. Right. But if you will accept the premise that the women who go to medical school or get PhDs in biomedical sciences have talent and capabilities equal to the men, there's no evidence that women have had a leg up in terms of entry into these fields. There was no DEI that got them in. They got in because they were really smart and talented. I can tell you, having been on many admissions committees, it's sometimes hard to find enough men. The female students are so much more together, if you will, that they're able to get the scores and the grades to a more prevalent degree than some of the men or people from different kinds of backgrounds. On the other hand, so you think they're really talented, they've got a lot to offer. And oh, by the way, do we need physicians? Yeah. Do we need scientists to make discoveries that will help us and our loved ones survive and thrive? Yeah. So what the heck are we doing? This is so incredibly harmful to our entire society to make these women's lives miserable. And in the case of the scientists, especially, to deprive them of the resources that they need to do the work that will actually help us. So I have nothing but compassion for any human who is harmed in her line of work, but the consequences to society are in some way really magnified when it comes to physicians and scientists. And I think most of us have gone through life feeling, the responsibility of our elitism. We are highly educated, we're very well compensated, we're very well respected, and yet, so you probably have never had a female doctor and wonder, gosh, I wonder who her Harvey Weinstein is. Like we don't think about it and we don't talk about it, but it'd be happening.
And so I wanted to ask about the title, harsh medicine. How did you land on that title? I'm very curious because it's a very bold title.
It is. Well, I have a really dear friend from college. He's actually an architectural historian. He has a leadership position at Vanderbilt University, and he has really been my moving buddy. We were art history majors together in college, and we've been dear friends ever since. And one of the realities of publishing with an academic press, and my book is published by Johns Hopkins University Presses, the marketing efforts are slightly different from trade presses. And so the titles that were being suggested were just not clicking, not moving. And so with my friend, we just brainstormed and we decided that this was both compelling. And Hopkins liked the idea of medicine being in the title because they thought that would be helpful to capture attention. But it was a group effort.
I love it.
It definitely grabs attention. Oh, yeah. It's good. Oh, yeah. It's a good one.
So after all of these interviews and the folks that you spoke with, what kind of gives you hope?
Oh my goodness. Thank you for that question. Well, first of all, I did not meet any terrible human beings. There may have been some older, mostly men, who were so attached to the world that they had grown up in that the idea of changing that world was very uncomfortable. And that's something that we should all be aware of, that when people view their professional world as a finite pool of resources, or it's a zero-sum game. The idea that someone else deserves additional resources or more support raises the possibility that something's going to be taken away from you. And that was not an uncommon sentiment in some of the older people, more men than women, that I interviewed. But that was not the dominant sentiment. I mean, what was really remarkable to me is the capacity for acquired insight by the men in the course of the interview. I'll give you some examples. So I would sit down with a man, and he was very certain that he got it. He understood. I mean, this is 2019, so DEI was still a priority. There were still offices at universities to support it, and he understood that there was bad stuff. And sometimes he was married to a woman in medicine or a woman scientist, and they told him what was going on, or sometimes his daughter was in the field, so he got it. But it was happening there. He couldn't, it was a really heavy lift to look into his own domain and see what was in front of him. And so what I understood in that moment, and it's still an incredibly, I think, important barrier to moving forward, is how do we have these conversations without blaming? How do we say to a person, I want to talk about this, but I don't want to talk about it with you to make you feel like you've done something wrong or that you are doing something wrong. I want to talk to you because I think you're an important ally. I think you're someone who can help. You're someone who has a lot of influence and status. And I think you can be but it's a barrier. It's a barrier because when we come to them and say there's something rotten happening in front of you, they're like, oh no, not me. I didn't do it. And that's an understandable reaction. And so I think we have to see it, identify it, and find ways to overcome it. And the other thing that was, and still is remarkable to me, is how uncomfortable people are with being uncomfortable. This is true everywhere. But, one of my taglines, which I still really, really believe, is talk to each other. Like I gave a talk at Yale about 2 years ago, and a chair department was there. And he said, well, what can I do about this? And I said, well, just the fact that you're here is like really cool. Yeah. Like you're showing up to this and you asked me that question in front of all these people who know that you're a leader here. And I said, when was the last time you asked a female colleague or trainee about her experiences? And he's like, never. I'm like, well, ask. And interesting, I was on a panel not long ago, and the man who I suggested he do that to said, oh, and luckily he said it in front of the whole audience, which was mostly women, I'm worried that they will wonder what I'm after. Like, what am I trying to get at? How is this intrusive? This is inappropriate. And I said, I mean, if you're coming at it with genuine curiosity and compassion, that's going to come through. If you don't have another agenda, I think that you can communicate that. And you can even specify that. And then a woman spoke up and said, yes, but if he asked me that, I'd be afraid of how he would hear what I tell him. Like if I tell him that I'm struggling here with this, will he then not give me more opportunities? I'm like, well, so what I realized is that there's all these conversations that we're having inside ourselves. I mean, think of any relationship you have, any human relationship, partner, child, parent, sibling. There's the conversations we have with each other, and there's the conversations that we have by ourselves. And what I think is we're having too many of these conversations alone, and we need to have these conversations together. And if we can just find ways to ask, like if someone says something and you hear it as an offense to you, I think it's okay to say, hey, I think I just heard you say this. Can you tell me what you meant by this? Because chances are what you heard and what they're trying to convey are not exactly the same thing. But if it is, then you say, can I tell you how that makes me feel? I think we can have these conversations without it being somebody wins and somebody loses. If the goal is let's understand each other better, let's make this a more inclusive and productive environment, everybody wins.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, and thinking about like the way I approach conversations, a lot of times I'm like, how will I be perceived, or what will they think? And the person that I'm speaking to is actually really open to that feedback. It's just, how do you begin that dialogue? How do you say it's okay to talk about this?
By being vulnerable, Annie, you can even start the conversations that like, I have all these stories in my head. I'm worried a little bit about how you'll perceive me if I ask you about this. Just, I think if we just get that out of the way, like, I'm nervous about this, but I think it's important that, because then you're on the same page. And it's hard to feel attacked by someone who's struggling.
I've always kind of like shied away from those conversations because I don't want to be perceived as difficult.
Right. I was thinking the same thing.
True.
Right.
And the difficult
same
woman
exact thing.
absolutely gets, and that's what women talk about with each other. Like, we want to move forward, but we don't want to be that person. And what I would say to that is totally understandable. So why don't we think of other ways to facilitate these conversations? Is why it doesn't have to be one person's effort. This can be sort of a collective. And if you have enough people on your team and it's a diverse team, you can potentially give each other different roles. I mean, there's the famous Obama White House deal where, they got together, the men and the women, and because they noticed that the women were being interrupted, their ideas were being, taken by others, and they just decided to amplify each other and support each other. And it was super effective, but they made this decision as a team. So what I would say is, if you're the only one in your organization who feels the way you do, you probably should leave. Like, it's probably not the right place for you. But if you're suffering, I promise you others are too. You're not alone. And it's just a question of finding each other and thinking, how can we do this together? How can we make this a better place? And I've been surprised now, but once again, I'm older and I'm super accomplished, so I can say things that other people can't say, and I do appreciate that. But then my message is, find people like me in your organization. Find people who are much more Teflon, who you have an affinity for, and say, I don't quite know how to bring this up. Can you help me figure out how to do that? And then maybe they'll take it on. That. And one of the things that I was aware of is that I managed to avoid the serious consequences of being harassed for most of my career because I grew up in an organization where I had really powerful men who protected me. And so when someone tried to hurt me, a more powerful man would fight for me. And I didn't even realize all the time that they were doing this. I didn't appreciate how I did not have to fight those battles on my own, because I wouldn't have won them if I had been fighting them on my own. And of course, by the time I got to a new institution in my 50s, I didn't have that posse.
That's a great point.
Yeah. And so I listened to a conversation that you had on I believe it was another podcast, and you said this really profound thing. And you said that I can do this work because I'm loved. And I thought about that in my own life. I feel really, really loved and fortunate. Can you tell us or our listeners what that has done for you as a human being?
Oh, so much. I think that, like many people, women and men, especially if we go into fields that are really demanding of our time and energy. And my husband and I are both physicians. And when we were training, there was no such thing as an 80-hour work week. I mean, that would have been a luxury. And our daughter is a pediatrician. And of course, she it was mandated. She could not work more than 80 hours. And we still saw through her eyes how exhausting it was. And so what I want to say is, when you're that depleted, physically and emotionally, you just want to be cared for. And so we look for people in our professional environment to care for us. And surprise, surprise, we don't always find people. And what I realized with time is that the fact that I was so loved in my personal environment, friends, family, chosen family, really gave me the strength to tolerate not being loved and cared for and cherished in my professional environment. And I think that we, particularly women, often make the mistake of thinking of our professional bosses as parent figures, but they're not. They're not thinking about us. They may not care about us. They may not. It's okay. That's just the way it is. But when I finally realized, stop looking for that. Stop expecting that, and see whatever he's doing for what it is, and see the lack of response for what it is. It's not personal. And it's funny. This is a Hillary Clinton thing, but it wasn't personal. It was serious. And I don't want to de-emphasize how serious it was. It was awful, but it wasn't about me. It was about him. And it was about the fact that his flawed version of being a human was tolerated by the university. That's the problem. The problem isn't that it wasn't me. I wasn't doing anything wrong, and I didn't deserve to be treated the way I was treated. And once I kind of realized that, I realized, yes, I am loved in life, and maybe I wasn't loved in that particular job, but that's okay. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with me.
Great.
Amazing.
Excellent. And so we have this kind of wrap up question that we always ask. And so if you could complete the sentence, this would make more sense, or this would all make sense if
we could be honest with ourselves about how we feel when we show up in our professional roles, we would have the clarity to see others and how they're showing up and what they're experiencing too.
Beautiful.
Amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
And we'll have links to the book in the show notes. So if you're looking for Harsh Medicine, we'll make sure you can find it very easily. I'm looking forward. I haven't read it yet, but I'm definitely going to read it. And I'm getting it for my mom too, who spent her life in career as a dental assistant and running an office. And so she's had, various experiences herself. So I think she'll enjoy it as well. But this has been amazing. Colleen and Annie, anything else you want to share with our guests before we wrap up? This has been fantastic.
I can't imagine the time that you've spent on this book and this project, but I applaud you for this really important work. It sounds like you went really deep with everyone that you talked to and are starting conversations that honestly we're all kind of afraid to have.
Yeah.
But can I just say the one thing that they were so grateful to be asked, the men and the women, even if it was uncomfortable, the opportunity to just explore how you feel about the life that you have is something we don't give each other very often.
That's a great point.
That's a great point. That's why I'm a sitter. That's why I'm a sitter on an airplane, so I can talk to people like you. I want to talk to you.
Full circle.
Sorry.
Oh, Annie, you just made it all make sense.
Making sense.
Or Dr. Grandis is going to find Annie next to her on a plane sometime.
Absolutely.
Your whole entire trip.
Just wear the hat, girlfriend.
I will. I will.
Okay.
I will bring you a hat. We'll both wear the hat.
Okay.
Thank you so much for joining us today. This has been an incredible conversation. And thanks for helping us make this make sense.
Thank you so much.
See y'all next time.
Bye.
Bye.